The briefing officer had a habit of talking to the wall behind your head, which meant either he was shy or he was lying. Dara Okonkwo had met enough of both kinds to know the difference. This one was lying by omission, which was technically worse. "Overnight escort," he said. "Standard protective detail. The dignitary is resting in holding corridor 7. You will accompany her to the morning session of the summit at 0600, hand off to the primary team, and that is the end of your involvement." Dara took the file. 1 page. A photograph of something gold and draped and entirely covered. The veil was thick enough to stop light. The name underneath read, Velitha of the House Sovhari 3rd Delegation. 3rd Delegation, Dara said. That's the junior cultural attaché level. It is. Then why is the corridor cleared? The briefing officer looked at the wall. Protocol. Right, she tucked the file under her arm. One more thing. You said do not react to the veil. React covers a lot of ground. Are we talking don't stare, don't comment, or don't pull it off? He finally looked at her. All three, and do not make eye contact with anything that comes through the fabric. Dara waited for him to explain that. He didn't. She walked out. Corridor 7 was so empty it echoed. 2 guards at the far end who looked at her transfer orders and stepped aside with the particular relief of people who had been waiting a long time to leave. The door at the end was plain gray steel, same as every other door on the station, except someone had placed a small Sovhari symbol above the handle. It looked like 2 hands pressed flat together, facing away from each other. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. "I am awake," said a voice from inside. Low, careful with the words, like each one cost something. "Sergeant Dara Okonkwo, Logistics Division. I'm your overnight escort." She paused. "I know that's probably not what you were hopping for." Another silence, then the door opened. The figure standing inside was taller than Dara by about half a head. The veil covered everything from the crown of the head to the collarbone, thick layered gold fabric that moved when she breathed. The rest of the Sovhari were described in the briefing materials as bipedal, roughly humanoid in structure, atmosphere compatible. The briefing materials had not mentioned that the hands were slightly too long, or that when Velitha stood still she stood completely still. No micro-adjustments, no weight shifting. The way humans always fidget without knowing they're doing it. Every other species Dara had worked with during her 2 years on station had some version of readable body language. You learned the tells. You got comfortable. She looked at the veil and thought, this is going to be a long night. "Cool, cool, cool," she said, mostly to herself. "So, you want to stand here or there's a bench?" Velitha looked at her. The veil moved. Just slightly at the lower edge where the fabric met the collar of her formal robe. A warmth bled through the seam, not reflected light, not a trick of the corridor's overhead panels. Something underneath the gold fabric was producing light the color of an old wound. Dara's face did nothing. She was not performing calm. She was not grinding her teeth and holding herself steady. She just looked at the warm gold light leaking through the seam of a veil on the face of a person she didn't know, and her face did nothing, because her brain had already filed it under. Noted, moving on. Velitha went very still, stiller than before. "You are not looking away," she said. "Was I supposed to?" 3 seconds passed, maybe 4. "Yes," Velitha said, "everyone does." Dara gestured at the bench against the far wall. Velitha crossed the room and sat. Dara took the post beside the door. She checked the corridor through the small window. Empty. She checked her comm. No updates. She settled into the particular stillness of someone who has done a lot of waiting in a lot of rooms and learned to make peace with it. "How long is the summit?" Velitha asked. "Closes tomorrow evening. You're in the morning session, then the formal address at 1600, then it's done. And you are logistics." "I am very much logistics." They sent a logistics officer for an overnight escort. There was a scheduling conflict with the primary team. I was available and I had the clearance. Dara looked at her calm again. Above my pay grade, and yet here I am. Velitha was quiet for a moment. That phrase, above your pay grade, it means something beyond your responsibility. It means something I was not trained for and will probably handle anyway. Something moved under the veil. Dara could not have said what. A tilt of the head, maybe. A shift in posture that was too small to name. My attendants, Velitha said, were briefed extensively before entering this station. They know the protocols. They know what to say and what not to say and where to look. A pause. You were not briefed extensively. I got 1 page and a corridor assignment. And you came anyway. That is, in fact, my job. Another silence, different from the first. The first silence had been the silence of someone waiting to see if you were a threat. This one was something else. Dara had felt it before in field work, in the particular moment when someone decided you were probably not going to make things worse. She filed it under progress. The corridor outside stayed empty. The station's ventilation system hummed through the walls. 3 hours to the morning handoff. Dara leaned against the wall beside the door, arms loose, watching the middle distance the way you do when you are awake but not wasting energy on it. Velitha sat on the bench with her hands in her lap, and the gold light seeping steady and quiet through the edge of the veil. Dara did not look at it directly, not because the briefing officer had told her not to. She had already decided the briefing officer was not the primary authority on the situation. She didn't look directly because Velitha hadn't offered it, and Dara had been raised by a woman who had opinions about taking things that weren't offered. But she didn't look away either. That was the whole of it. That was the thing that was already, though she didn't know it yet, rewriting 400 years of galactic diplomatic protocol in the space of a holding room the size of a parking spot. She didn't look away. My name, Velitha said very quietly, is not easy and standard. I got Velitha from the file. I was going to ask you which part to drop if that's okay. The veil, just Itha. Okay, Dara looked at her. Itha. The light under the veil changed. Still warm. Still gold threaded with red. But something shifted in it the way light shifts when a cloud moves and you weren't watching the sky. Dara noticed, filed it, said nothing. 2 hours and 40 minutes left. The corridor stayed empty. Nobody came to check on them. Whatever the rest of the station was doing with the summit preparation, it was happening somewhere else. And in here there was just the hum of the ventilation and the bench and the door and the light that kept its quiet vigil behind gold fabric. Dara thought about Emeka once. Then she put it somewhere else. She was good at that. At 05:15 the primary team arrived. 4 of them, dressed correctly, briefed correctly, eyes doing the elaborate trained avoidance that the briefing had described. They did not look at the veil. They did not look at anything that might produce a reflection. The lead officer gave Dara a nod that said, "Thanks, we've got it, you can go." Dara picked up her kit. She looked at Velitha, who was standing now, robe straight, veil resettled and fully covering. Morning session at 0600, Dara said. Should be straightforward. Yes, Velitha said. Then quieter. Thank you for the bench. Dara nodded once, walked out. She did not think about the light under the veil, or the way it had shifted when she said the name, or the thing the attendant would tell her tomorrow that would split the last 2 words of a sentence she hadn't finished thinking, yet into 2 categories she had no training for. She counted the doors back to the logistics bay. She got to 9 before she lost count. She started over. The Grand Hall of Kepler Diplomatic Station had been designed by a committee of 7 species over a period of 22 years, and it showed. The ceiling was too high for the gravity. The lighting was calibrated for 3 different atmospheric preferences at once, and the floor was a pattern that gave at least 4 species a mild stress response if they stared at it for more than 10 seconds. Dara had been told all of this in the supplemental briefing she'd received at 0550, which was the briefing she should have gotten the night before. She had not mentioned that she'd already spent the night in a room with the dignitary it was mostly about. The summit's morning session opened with 47 delegations arranged in a semicircle that was technically a full circle with one gap left open for the Veth Collective, who entered last and entered backwards, which was apparently the formal greeting of a species that had evolved in an environment where showing your back meant you trusted the room completely. Dara watched them walk in reverse to their seats with the focused attention of someone mentally revising everything she thought she knew about first impressions. Her post was left flank, not a speaking position, not an action position. Stand here, watch the door, look like you belong. She was good at looking like she belonged. It was, in her opinion, the most underrated skill in the military. Velitha entered fourth, veil fully in place, robe perfect, the two court attendants on either side moving with the precise trained synchrony of people who had rehearsed this walk many times. She took her position in the semicircle and stood the way she had stood in the holding room, completely still, no fidgeting. The room did something interesting. Dara watched it happen. Every delegation, without apparent coordination, performed a small adjustment. The Droth, gray-skinned and four-armed, reached up and dimmed the photoreceptor membranes over their eyes, the way you lower a visor against bright sun. The Veth Collective angled their backwards-facing bodies slightly away. The delegation from Myra Station, who were covered in sensory cilia, folded the cilia flat against their arms. Even the human delegation, 3 officers from the diplomatic corps, found something very interesting to look at on their data tablets. The entire room had a system for not looking at Velitha. Every species had built their own version of the same machine. Dara stood at left flank and looked at the room, looking away, and thought, huh. The morning session covered resource allocation agreements between 4 inter-system colonies and a trade route dispute that had been running for 11 years. Dara did not follow most of it. She watched doors, watched the room, watched Velitha stand perfectly still while 3 speakers gestured at her delegation's territorial markers on the central holographic display, and noted that Velitha had not eaten the meal that had been provided on the delegate tables. Not touched it, not moved it aside, just left it exactly as placed, the way you leave something you have forgotten is there. At mid-session break, the delegations dispersed into the adjacent reception space. Dara moved with her assignment. Velitha walked to the far edge of the room, away from the food tables, and stood at the observation window that looked out over the station's docking ring. Dara took the post 3 feet to her left. They stood there. The docking ring was busy. A cargo hauler was running a docking sequence. 2 fighter escorts rotated in holding pattern above it. The Droth do the eye thing every time, Dara asked, not looking at her, looking at the docking ring. Every time, Velitha said. And the Veth turn away. The Veth turn away. And your own attendants. A pause. They are trained to see only the space beside my face. Dara watched the cargo hauler complete its approach. That sounds exhausting, for everyone. Velitha said nothing. Is this a them problem or you problem? Dara asked. 3 seconds, 4. Both, Velitha said. Yeah, Dara said, same. She did not explain what she meant by same. She didn't need to. Velitha didn't ask. They watched the cargo hauler dock and the fighter escorts break rotation, and the busy ordinary machinery of a station going about its business, while 47 species inside tried very hard not to see what was right in front of them. At the end of the break, one of Velitha's court attendants appeared at Dara's elbow, a small man with the particular expression of someone about to say something they have rehearsed. Sergeant, he said, a word. He walked her 2 steps away, not far enough to be out of Velitha's hearing range, which Dara suspected was intentional. You have been maintaining eye contact with Her Highness during the formal session. She's part of the room I'm assigned to watch. You have been looking at her face directly. I've been looking at her veil. There's a difference. The attendant's expression went careful. On our world, Sergeant, there are only two categories of person who look at the grief light directly, those condemned to see it, and those permitted to see it. Dara looked at him. What's the difference? The condemned, he said quietly, are being punished. The permitted are, he paused. There is no clean translation. The closest standard word is beloved. Dara looked at the attendant for a moment. Then she looked at her assignment post. I'm going to go back to watching the door, she said. Sergeant, you understand what I am telling you. I understand that I was watching a room and a person in it, and I didn't know I was supposed to have a policy about it. I'll file that. She nodded once. Thanks for the cultural briefing. She went back to her post. She stood at left flank for the rest of the session. She did not look at Velitha. She looked at the door, the room, the exits, the delegations, the Droth with their dimmed photoreceptors, the Veth with their elegant backwards dignity. At the close of the morning session, she allowed herself one look. Velitha was standing at her position in the semicircle, perfectly still, veil in place. The gold fabric caught the room's three-spectrum lighting and gave nothing back. Dara went back to watching the door. She didn't know which category the attendant had put her in. She told herself it didn't matter. She had told herself that before about things that mattered enormously and had not yet finished mattering, and she was starting to suspect she was not very good at filing the things that needed to stay unfiled. The door stayed clear. Nobody came through it who wasn't supposed to. She did her job. That was enough. That was, she told herself, the whole of it. The afternoon session began at 1400. The summit's formal address was scheduled for 1600. 2 hours of subcommittee review and documentation sign-off between here and the part of the day that the supplemental briefing had described, with underlined text, as the most diplomatically sensitive event of the summit. Dara had underlined sensitive. She had not written a note next to it. She didn't need to. She already had a feeling about 1600. She was, as it turned out, completely right. But that was still 2 hours away. For now there was a door, and a room full of 47 species, and a woman standing perfectly still in the middle of all of it, and the particular brightness that pressed quietly against the inside of a gold veil, patient as a tide, waiting for something Dara didn't have a name for yet. She watched the door. She kept her face exactly where it was. The waiting room had been designed for equipment storage, and someone had put 2 chairs in it as an afterthought. One of them had a loose bolt that clicked whenever you shifted your weight. Dara had been shifting her weight every 4 minutes for the past 40, not because she was nervous, but because the bolt's click had become a kind of clock, and she liked knowing what time it was even when she didn't know what was coming. The docking dispute that had frozen the summit's afternoon session was, according to the update on her comm, ongoing. 3 ships, 2 territorial claims, 11 lawyers, no projected resolution time. She and Velitha had been placed in the equipment room with chairs while the primary diplomatic team worked the dispute in the main hall, a neutral holding space, secure, quiet, the kind of quiet that collected in corners. Velitha had not sat in either of the chairs. She was standing at the far wall, facing it, with her back to the room. After 11 minutes of this, Dara said, "That wall didn't do anything to you." Velitha turned around. She reached up. She took off the veil. Not dramatically, not slowly. The way you take off a piece of clothing at the end of a long day, because it is heavy and you are tired and there is no good reason to keep wearing it here. Dara had been told by the supplemental briefing that the Sovhari were bioluminescent. The briefing had included a photograph. The photograph had not been useful. Velitha's face was the face of a person in her mid-20s. The structure was familiar enough, eyes, nose, a mouth, but the proportions were slightly different, longer through the jaw, wider through the brow. The eyes a color that did not map to anything in the standard spectrum descriptions. And across her skin, from the edge of her jaw to the top of her cheekbones, moving slow as breathing, was light. Gold mostly, deep red threading through it. The red moved in patterns, not random, not static, something between the two. It was the light of a feeling that had been running too long and was no longer able to stay inside the container it had been given. Dara looked at it the way she looked at everything, directly, without filling the silence with a reaction. "The waiting room," Velitha said, "is secure." "Yes." "There are no other delegations." "No." Velitha sat in the chair without the loose bolt. She held the veil in her hands and looked at it. "My attendant told me what he said to you," she said. "Okay." He was not wrong about the categories. Dara leaned back in the chair with the loose bolt. Click. "I didn't know there were categories. I was watching a room." "I know." Velitha looked up. The light across her face shifted, a slow pulse, the red deepening briefly. "That is what made it different." Dara looked at her hands for a moment, then back up. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why does it bother them, the other species? The Droth, the Veth, all of it. Biologically, I mean, not the protocol, the actual reason." Velitha was quiet for a moment. The light moved. "For most species in this quadrant," she said, "visible distress is a signal, involuntary, contagious. The Droth evolved in high predator environments where visible grief in one member triggered defensive responses in all members. If you see the grief light, your body prepares for whatever caused it. You cannot stop it, so they stop seeing it. They dim their eyes. They have been dimming their eyes for 300 years of contact. It is now culture. It began as biology." Dara considered this. "What about the Veth?" "The Veth," Velitha said, "turn away because facing visible grief directly is, in their culture, a form of aggression. It means, I see that you are suffering and I am watching. On their world, a predator watches, so they give you their back. It means I am not watching. You are safe. So they're being kind." "In their way, yes." "And humans," Dara said, "just look." "And humans just look." She said it without judgment. She said it like she was trying to understand the shape of something she had no word for. Dara thought about it, not the diplomatic answer, the honest one. "We don't have a better option," she said. "We're soft all the way through, no shell. We can't change color. Everything shows on our faces all the time whether we want it to or not." She looked at the wall. "After a while you either spend all your energy trying to hide it, which doesn't work, or you just—" she paused. "You just own it, you look, you let people look." "On my world," Velitha said quietly, "that would be considered a confession of weakness. On mine it's called Tuesday." Something moved across the light on Velitha's face. The red stayed, but something new threaded through it, very faint, a color Dara didn't have a name for. They sat in the quiet for a while. The ventilation hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, the muffled sound of the ongoing dispute reached them briefly and then faded. "The light," Dara said, not pointing, not gesturing, just nomming it. "Does it hurt?" "No." Velitha looked down at the veil in her hands. "It is simply visible. What is inside becomes outside. I cannot choose when." "What's inside right now?" A long pause. "Grief," Velitha said. "Old grief, the kind that does not move." She turned the veil over in her hands. "There was a person who was part of my household, a bonded companion from childhood." She stopped. Dara waited. "I gave an order," Velitha said. "He obeyed it." 5 words. She did not explain them. She said them the way you say the thing you have said to yourself 10,000 times and have never said to another person, in the flat voice of someone who has run out of the energy required to make it sound smaller than it is. Dara said, "Yeah." That was all. One word. Not a question. Not a prompt. not a performance of sympathy, just the sound of someone who had heard something true and was willing to sit in the same room with it. Velitha looked at her. "You are not going to ask," she said. "No. Everyone asks, eventually." "I don't need to know the details to know it was bad," Dara said. "You're here, you haven't stopped carrying it, that's enough information." The faint new color in Velitha's grief light brightened, just slightly, just for a moment. A cool blue threading through the gold and red, moving slow like something surfacing from deep water. Dara looked at it. She didn't know what it meant. She thought it looked like the color of something at the very bottom of something large and dark, finally catching a little light from above. She didn't say that. Some things are not for saying. "You never answered my question," Velitha said, "from earlier." "Which one?" "You said same. When I said it was both a them problem and a mine, you said same." Dara looked at the wall. "There's someone I think about sometimes," she said, "and I'm very good at not thinking about him most of the time." She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "And then there's a day every year where I'm not good at it, and a few weeks around that day where I'm only okay at it." Velitha said nothing. "He was my brother," Dara said. "He was 24, she stopped, put it back where it lived. He was the funniest person I knew." Silence. "I was not there," she said. That was all. She did not explain what that meant. She didn't need to. "I was not there either," Velitha said. They looked at each other across the small room. Two people who had each been absent from the moment that mattered most, sitting in a room full of spare equipment, and one good chair, and one chair with a loose bolt, with no protocol between them and no training that covered this exact distance. The grief light on Velitha's face pulsed slow and steady, gold and red and that new faint blue. Dara did not look away. The knock came at 40 minutes. Velitha reached for the veil. She held it for a moment before putting it on, and the 3 extra seconds she took were not hesitation. They were something else, a small, deliberate thing. Then the veil was back. The light was covered. The door opened and the attendant was there with his careful face and his briefing room posture. "The dispute has been resolved, Your Highness. The address begins in 20 minutes. "Yes," Velitha said, "I know." She walked out. Dara picked up her kit and followed 3 steps behind, and did not think about the blue color that she had no name for, and did not think about the word the attendant had used, and absolutely did not think about the loose thread she had pulled entirely free from her sleeve without noticing. She filed it under, above my pay grade. She had been using that folder a lot lately. It was getting full. The formal address hall was larger than the morning session room and colder by about 4 degrees, which was either an atmospheric calibration choice or no one had gotten around to fixing it. The delegations were already seated when Dara took her post at left flank. 47 species, arranged in the same semicircle, the same elaborate choreography of carefully pointed gazes. The Droth had their photoreceptors dimmed before Velitha even entered. She entered at precisely 1600. The walk to the address platform was 12 steps. Dara counted them. Velitha took each one with the complete stillness that was not rigidity but something that looked like a person who had decided, at some point, that their body was a thing they could make very precise and reliable when everything else was not. The address platform was elevated by 3 steps. Velitha climbed them. The veil caught the hall's overhead lighting and held it, a deep gold rectangle that moved slightly when she breathed and gave away nothing else. She began to speak. Her standard was formal and very clean. No contractions. Each sentence given its full weight. The address covered the Sovhari delegation's position on the territorial water dispute, their acknowledgement of the 11-year negotiation timeline, their proposal for the joint monitoring framework that would either resolve the conflict or, more likely, delay it productively for another 7 years. Dara watched the room. She watched the Veth ambassador, whose backwards posture managed to convey careful attention from a direction that should not have allowed for it. She watched the Droth secondary officers shift in their seat. She watched the 3 officers from the human delegation look at their tablets. At 40 seconds into the address, Velitha's veil tore. Not a dramatic split. A seam at the lower right edge, where the fabric met the collar, where it had been under tension since the night before, since all the hours of wearing something heavy for a long time in a room that did not require it. A small failure. The kind that happens when a thing has been held too tightly for too long. The light came through immediately. Gold, deep red. That faint blue that had appeared in the equipment room and had not fully faded since. It came through the torn seam and spread, because the fabric had moved when the seam went, and now there was a gap 3 inches long at the lower edge of the veil, and the grief light of the Solfhari princess was visible in a formal diplomatic address hall in front of 47 delegations for the first time in recorded contact history. The room reacted the only way it knew how. The Droth dimmed their photoreceptors to the deepest setting available. The Veth turned fractionally further away. The Myra Station delegation folded their cilia flat to their bodies. The human delegation looked at their tablets. 7 other species produced their own version of the same response, each one culturally distinct and biologically rooted and functionally identical. A room full of people performing a collective agreement not to see. Velitha stopped speaking. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that is weight, not empty, full of every word that no one was saying. She stood on the address platform with the light pouring through the torn seam of her veil, and the room not seeing her, and 47 species maintaining their practiced careful nothing. And Dara watched the set of her shoulders from left flank and saw the precise moment when Velitha understood that she was, in the middle of the most watched room on the station, entirely alone. Dara turned her face toward the platform. She did not move, she did not step forward, she did not make a sound. She simply turned her face toward Velitha and kept it there. That was the whole of the action, a shift of posture, a direction. And because the room was performing its not seeing so completely, no one noticed immediately. The Droth were looking through dimmed receptors at the middle distance. The Veth were looking at the wall behind them. The human delegation was looking at their tablets. Velitha's grief light spilled through the torn seam of her veil and lit the air in front of her. And at left flank, one logistics sergeant from Chicago was looking directly at it without moving, without flinching, without performing any kind of reaction except presence. Velitha found her. The distance between the address platform and the left flank post was approximately 30 feet. Across that distance, and through the light pouring from a tier in gold fabric, they looked at each other. 4 seconds passed. Velitha straightened her spine by a fraction, lifted her chin, and continued the address. She did not reach for the veil. She did not stop to acknowledge the tier or the light or the room's elaborate pretending. She picked up the sentence exactly where she had stopped it, in the middle of a phrase about the monitoring framework's proposed third-party oversight committee, and she completed it. And then she completed the sentence after that, and the one after that, and the grief light moved across her face in its slow gold and red and blue patterns, and her voice stayed level, and she gave the full address. Every single word of it. 14 minutes, 3 policy proposals, 2 references to historical precedent, 1 direct challenge to the Myra Station claim that was phrased so precisely in formal diplomatic language that it took Dara a full 30 seconds to realize it was a challenge. When it was done, Velitha inclined her head to the room and stepped back from the platform. The room's applause response varied by species. The Droth produced a low harmonic. The human delegation did the standard clap. The Veth turned 45 degrees, which was apparently the formal approval gesture. Nobody mentioned the veil. Nobody looked at the light. Nobody except one delegate who had not been present for the morning session, who had arrived with the Veth Collective's secondary attaché team and taken a seat near the back. This was the Veth ambassador himself, Senior, whose name translated approximately as first facing, and who had been turning his back on the world for 60 years of diplomatic service. He turned around. Not to look at the veil, not at the light. He turned around and looked at Dara. His eyes, flat and wide and built for a world with no forward-facing predators, held steady for a moment. Then he looked at Velitha, then back at Dara. He inclined his head. Then he turned back around. Dara filed that under, no category available. She waited for Velitha to come off the platform and fell in 2 steps behind, and they walked out of the formal address hall together, and neither of them said anything. And Dara kept her eyes forward and did not look at the grief light still visible through the torn seam, and did not think about the moment 30 feet and 14 minutes ago that she also did not have a category for. She counted the steps to the door. She got to 12. She had not lost count once. The logistics bay smelled like machine oil and recycled air, and the particular clean emptiness of a room used for transit. Crates were lined against the left wall, all of them stamped with transfer codes for the post-summit outgoing shipments. Dara had been assigned to inventory verification, which meant counting crates, cross-referencing numbers, and generating a transfer manifest by 1700. She was on crate 11 when she heard the door. She did not look up immediately, not because she was being deliberate about it. She was counting. 11. She wrote 11. She looked up. Velitha was standing inside the door. No attendants, no robe, a simpler garment, the kind of thing that read as practical even in an unfamiliar cut. The veil was gone. Her face was uncovered and the grief light moved across it in the logistics bay's flat industrial yellow lighting, and that blue thread was there, the one Dara still had no name for, brighter now than it had been in the equipment room. "You did not have to come down here," Dara said. "I know," Velitha looked at the crates. "I wanted to." Dara wrote 11 on her manifest. She walked to crate 12. "The Veth ambassador turned around during the address," she said. "Yes." The briefing material said that had not happened in 40 years of contact history. 42 years, Velitha said. The last time was when the Veth Collective signed the original cooperation charter. It was their signal that they were ready to face what came next. She crossed the room and stood near the second row of crates, not in the way, just present. This time, they were looking at you. Dara wrote 12. I wasn't doing anything. I know. Velitha was quiet for a moment. That is what they are crediting you for. 13. The code on 13's label was smudged. She tilted it toward the light. Your attendant told me, Dara said, that there are 2 kinds of people who look at the grief light directly, the condemned and the beloved. Yes. He didn't tell me which one I was. The silence stretched. He did not know, Velitha said. Neither did I at first. The condemned look because they have no choice. It is something done to them. A pause. You had a choice. Every species in that room had built a system specifically so they would not have to choose, and you had no system. I had a briefing, Dara said. You had 1 page. It said don't react. And you decided, Velitha said very quietly, that looking was not reacting. 14:15. Dara's hand was steady. She wrote the numbers. My species, Velitha continued, and her voice had shifted into something more careful, the way her voice got when she was putting words together from 2 different languages and needed to be precise, built the veil protocol 400 years ago, not to hide the grief light. The veil came later. Before the veil, we built the social system. We created distance. We created the protocol of not seeing, and we asked other species to participate in it, and they agreed because it matched something in their own biology. Dara looked up. We told ourselves it was dignity, Velitha said, that it was respectful to allow someone to carry grief without being seen in it. That looking was aggression. She looked at the blue thread moving through the gold on her own hands. We had this belief for 400 years. Other species confirmed it for us by building their own versions of it. Everyone agreed. No one looked. Until a logistics sergeant with a one-page briefing showed up. Until that, a pause. I asked one of the diplomatic historians last night, after the address, whether there was any record of a non-Sylvari choosing to witness the grief flight voluntarily in a formal setting. What did they say? They said there were 3 records. 2 were research documentation, controlled conditions. 1 was an incident in the early contact period that was classified as a diplomatic violation and resulted in a formal apology from the human government. She tilted her head. The apology stated that the human officer involved had not understood the cultural significance of what they were doing. What were they doing? Holding eye contact with a grieving Sylvari delegate for 4 seconds during a trade negotiation. Velitha looked at Dara. The apology was accepted. The officer was reassigned. The Sylvari delegation described the incident as profoundly intrusive. And now the Veth ambassador turned around. Velitha sat on the edge of a crate. It held her weight. Because he watched a human choose to witness what every other species in the room had built 400 years of protocol to avoid, and he thought. She paused. I do not know exactly what he thought, but he turned around. Dara wrote 16, 17. Your species, Velitha said slowly, decided that witnessing was worth the cost. Dara thought about this. The honest answer, not the diplomatic one. We didn't decide anything, she said. We just didn't have anywhere to hide. She set down the manifest. We can't change color. We can't dim our eyes. Everything we feel shows up on our faces and in our voices and in the way we stand, and we figured out a long time ago that trying to hide it just makes you tired. So we stopped. She looked at Velitha. We look because we don't have the option of not looking. We built a whole culture around the fact that we are going to see each other's worst moments, whether we try to or not. We might as well be present for them. Velitha was quiet for a long time. The logistics bay hummed. The industrial lighting didn't flatter anything and didn't try to. On my world, Velitha said finally, what you just described would be a vulnerability so significant that it would disqualify a species from serious diplomatic participation. I know. And yet you are the only species in 42 years to make the Veth turn around. Cool, 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 Dara said softly, mostly to herself. The grief light on Velitha's face moved through its slow patterns. Gold, red, that blue, which was brighter than it had ever been, which was no longer faint at all but clear and cool, and moving through the rest of it like water finding the level it was meant to find. Dara would ask about the blue later. Not today. Today she had 17 crates left to count. She was on 18 when she said, Emeka. Not to Velitha, not to the room, just to the air in front of her. One word, the way you say a thing you have been holding in your hands for a long time and need, for a moment, to put down. Her brother's name. She had not said it out loud since the card she sent to their mother. She had said it thousands of times inside her head, where it sounded like a question she already knew the answer to and could not stop asking. She had said it on the anniversary in the particular private dark of a room with no one in it. She had not said it where it could be heard. Emeka. Velitha did not ask, did not move, did not fill the space. She said yes. That one syllable, quiet, level, the sound of someone who understood exactly what was being carried and was not going to touch it and was not going to look away from it either. Dara wrote 18, 19. Her handwriting was exactly the same as it always was. That was not because she was fine. That was because she was very good at this, the going on, the steady continuing, the hands that do their work while the rest of you holds what it holds. I was not there, she said. She had said it to Velitha once already in the equipment room, And she was saying it again not because she had forgotten that she had said it, but because it was true every time. It was true in the way that facts are true, undiminished by repetition. "I know," Vilitha said. "I was on station. He was home. It was an ordinary Tuesday and I was counting inventory on a ship 2 systems away and she stopped. He was 24 years old. He was planning to start his graduate program in the fall." A pause. He made these lists. Everything he was going to do, very specific, not big ambitions, just concrete things. Cook that dish, learn that song, call that person back. She looked at the crate in front of her. "He never finished a single list," she said. "Not once in his life, but he always started a new one." The grief light on Velitha's face was the blue of deep water now, mostly. The gold and red were still there underneath, but the blue had risen to the surface, and Dara was looking at it, and not looking away, and something in the shape of that exchange was different from anything that had happened in this bay before, or maybe in this station before, or, according to the diplomatic historian's records, in 42 years of contact history. "I gave an order," Velitha said. "He obeyed it." She had said those words before in the equipment room. She said them again now the same way Dara had said I was not there because they were true every time. "He trusted me. He had trusted me since we were children, and she stopped. I told myself that he would not have wanted it differently, that he would have said it was right. I do not know if that is true. I will not ever know." "No," Dara said, "you won't." Not comfort, not reassurance, just the truth offered clean. Velitha looked at her for a long moment. The blue light was very steady now. "How do you carry it?" she asked. "The not knowing, the not being there." Dara counted crate 20, 21. She thought about it, really thought about it, not the version she had rehearsed, not the things she had said to the grief counselor on the station 2 years ago. "You don't put it down," she said. "You just learn which hand to carry it and so the other one is free." A long silence. "That will take me some time to learn," Velitha said. "Yeah," Dara looked at her. "It takes a while." The bay's ventilation ran its cycle. The crates waited in their rows. The transfer manifest had 28 items left on it and a deadline in 40 minutes. "Your reassignment came through," Velitha said. "Kepler Station, yes. You will leave tomorrow morning." 0800. Velitha stood. She smoothed the front of her practical garment with both hands, a gesture that was utterly ordinary and somehow very human in its ordinariness. She looked at the crates as if they had something to say. "When I return home," she said, "there will be a formal review of the summit outcomes. My address will be cited as a moment of significance. The Veth ambassador turning around will be the subject of analyses for the next decade." She paused. "My veil tearing will be noted in the record as an incident." "How will they classify it?" "I do not know yet." She looked at Dara. "I know how I will classify it." Dara waited. "The beginning of something," Velitha said. "I do not have the exact word yet, but it begins in a logistics bay with a loose bolt on a chair and a human who did not have anywhere to hide, and I think," a pause, "I think it begins with the understanding that being seen in your grief is not the same as being weakened by it." Dara thought about a list on a kitchen table somewhere. Specific, concrete things. A graduate program starting in the fall. "No," she said, "it's not." Velitha inclined her head. The grief light was blue and gold and steady, and in the flat industrial yellow of the logistics bay, it was the most honest thing in the room. "Itha," Dara said. Velitha looked at her. "Start a list," Dara said, "of the things you are going to do, concrete things, small ones, the kind you won't finish." Velitha did not smile. She did not have the expression for it yet, not in standard body language, not in a way that translated across 30 feet of contact history. But the blue in her grief light shifted, deepened, held. She walked to the door. She put her hand on it. She did not open it immediately. "Sergeant Okonkwo," she said. "Dara." A pause. Dara. She said the name the way you say a word in a new language the first time you trust yourself with it. I will remember that you looked. Dara picked up her manifest. I will remember that you kept talking, she said. The door opened. Velitha walked out. The door closed behind her. Dara stood in the logistics bay with her transfer manifest in 28 crates, and the particular quality of silence that follows a thing that has finished happening, but has not yet finished mattering. She counted crate 22. Wrote it down. She thought about a list she was going to start when she got to Kepler Station. Small things, concrete, the kind you probably wouldn't finish. Her handwriting was steady. That was not because nothing had happened. It was because she was still here, still counting, still in both hands, carrying it the way you carry something you have decided to carry. 23. 24. The bay hummed around her, ordinary and unglamorous and completely sufficient, and outside it, somewhere in the station, 47 species were packing up their delegations and writing their reports and trying to find the right language for what had happened in this ordinary, unremarkable day, and none of them had quite the right words yet, and that was fine. Some things do not need to be named to be true. 25. She kept counting,